Deputy Speaker.
As we resume, I will recognize the member for Laventille West, and you have 9 minutes, 17 seconds of your initial speaking time. Proceed.
Thank you very much. So, Deputy Speaker, the member for Naparima told us correctly, perhaps for the only time, that this law alone would not do the business for Trinidad and Tobago, and we agree with that. No one law could. We can't expect that. This is why we've been working hard to quicken the criminal justice system, new judges, new courts, more resources. In terms of the DPP, he spoke of that. The DPP now has 3 new offices between Tobago, San Fernando, and Port of Spain, created more space for them. And I'm aware personally, more attorneys have been hired in that department, but that's only the office of the DPP, which deals largely with criminal matters. But we have the family court division established. We've now set up the specialized criminal court division, and action is being taken. We did a manpower police audit to see how many police officers we need, what kind of skill sets we need. And I'm happy in respect of this bail bill, part of which touches the Firearms Act. And in particular, which says that if you are charged for a firearm offense and you find yourself being charged again, that's one of the ways in which your bail would be restricted under this amendment. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm happy to report in my conversation with certain elements of the police service in the course of my work, I'm told that they are now in a position, most of these matters, a magistrate could give up to 10 years as a sentence, and most of these firearm matters can be done summarily in the magistrate's court. So once a date is fixed for trial, the interagency task force has given the assurance, because the police armorer who used to certify that the thing is a firearm, we had stopped that some years ago, and now the court is accepting the certificate of the police armorer, and of course CIRU, which is the department that looks for DNA elements and connecting with other crimes and so on around that particular firearm. Once a date for trial is set, then the IATF and other elements of the police service should be able to be ready within 2 or 3 weeks of that date and be able to advance evidence in this matter. So these provisions say that when you are charged, anyway, I'll come to that, but when you are charged for a firearm offense in particular, and you meet another charge for a firearm offense, then your bail will be restricted for 120 days, unless, of course, it will be restricted for 128 days where no evidence, and where no evidence has begun to be heard in your matter. Within that 120 days, you can apply to the judge for bail. Accountability is another issue. Well, I've already touched on the question of border security. That is important. This law, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is not for us. It is not for the government. It is not for the PNM. It is for the people of Trinidad and Tobago who elected 41 of us to represent them here, as indeed I represent Laventille West, as my friend from Pointe-a-Pierre represents Pointe-a-Pierre. We speak on their behalf. They cry out to us. So every time I hear one of my colleagues, particularly on the other side, highlight the heinous crimes that are taking place and the trauma that the society is suffering as a consequence, including the issue of the 7 fishermen. And then I had a death last week, a gentleman, let me just say Anthony, he was killed. Not because he was involved. The police will tell you, the community tells you, his wife would tell you tearfully. He wasn't involved in anything. He walked across border lines in the area, the empty foolishness of border lines. Because he was confident, he did no wrong, he expected nothing, but he was killed. Only because it is alleged that his brother was involved in certain behaviors. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I take the opportunity to say to the young men who we are addressing and the few women who we are addressing in this bail amendment today, and who we addressed in the anti-gang law, which interlinks with this bail amendment, desist from walking that way. The evidence is clear. It only ends in the cemetery or in the jail. There's no future. I've seen many a young man die, and when you go to their homes, the circumstances are Spartan, very bleak. You can't see any evidence of profit from their criminal activity. In fact, they leave their families with the burden of funeral expenses sometimes. And they leave 2 and 3 children sometimes for society to take up the tab, a grandmother, an aunt. Sometimes children, young Tisha Henry. I went into the John area last week, and I saw a big picture of little Tisha Henry. I remember when that 2-year-old was murdered and found up under a house. I'm sorry to have to repeat the facts, but it goes no place. So we understand that. And I'm asking the young men to desist from this, because jail are nice. And your liberty will be taken away from you. Time that you could have spent in the Laventille Technology and Continuing Education Center, time that you could have spent in UTT, in Costat, in any school anywhere in this country. If you are now a schoolboy, time that you could have spent focusing on your work for your personal development, so you could become independent in this life. You could support your mother, you could support your father, you could support your siblings. And you will make a contribution to the welfare of our country. These measures are not for us. It is to guide and to protect these youngsters. They are under the influence of other people, movies, all kinds of things. And we, therefore, have to take action to protect them and to protect us. And it is in this way I see this. We are, on this side, we are guided by nobility and principle and truth. And if you want any proof of that, in 2011, when they came to us for special majority support around the anti-gang bill and an amendment to the Bail Act, which said that if you were charged under the anti-gang law, your bail would have been restricted for 120 days. We gave them that support. And, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the police reported to us that the gangsters were virtually saying, charge me for the gun when they caught them. Charge me for the robbery. Charge me for the larceny, but for God's sake, don't charge me under the anti-gang. Because the worst experience they had is to not be able to get any bail for 128 days, 20 days. Because they were accustomed to the revolving door. They get locked up and they come out tomorrow. And you know what that does? People in the community see and they know. They may not tell the police because they live in fear. Sometimes they tell the police. They know that this man is committing crime. Rape somebody, burn down somebody's house, shoot somebody. They know that. They know this man walking up and down the block with a gun. The police, after painstaking inquiries, come, arrest the culprit, carry him down the road. Hear what happens. 2 days later, he shows up in the community again. The law is brought into disrepute. The society loses, the community loses confidence in the law because they say, but wait, this man, and if I talk to the police, look the man in my face here again. He get locked up again for something else. He got in 2 days, he back outside. And finally, when his day finally comes, the police officer either retire or didn't show up in court, or the witness don't want to come anymore because so much time has elapsed. The matter is dismissed. You see them on the front of the courthouse celebrating a big victory. And then if they get convicted, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the magistrate in some unfortunate cases, after spending months and years doing intelligence work, putting in resources, undercover work, getting information, people tipping off the police, the magistrate finds the man $2,500 for a whole firearm, 20 rounds of ammunition, or as the Minister of National Security said, with a long 33 clip magazine.
At this time, your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15 minutes. Care to avail yourself?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Deputy
Proceed.
Speaker. Thank you. So these amendments here are particularly critical. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in section 5(2)(f) tells us that, among other things, and I won't take time to go into it, but it tells us that a person is entitled to reasonable bail without just cause. That is written as a fundamental right in section 5(2)(f) of the Constitution. So today, as we come here to amend the Bail Act, and that amendment will infringe on that clearly stated constitutional right, it requires a special majority. We require the votes of my colleagues on the other side, only for that reason. Had I more time, I would have read the provisions of this Constitution, but it is not necessary. Suffice it to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the very Constitution authorizes amendments to it, an amendment to laws that infringe on these constitutional rights as written in section 4 and 5 of the Constitution. And as the Attorney General, and I don't have to spend time reading the matter myself, Lord Falconer, in a case that went before him and them at the Privy Council, told us, well, in fact, they upheld restrictive provisions in bail law. So the restrictive provisions that we are trying to amend to go back to, we've been here before. We were here with the anti-gang law and the bail law, which we gave them support for. But they refused to endorse it in 2016 when the sunset clause fell upon it and it expired. That went along the anti-gang law with the Bail Act, as I said, and they refused to support us now that we were in government with all of it. And it fell by the wayside. And it had the effect of taking us back all the 15 amendments to the Bail Act since 1994 when it was passed. And I watched the debate in this parliament. I wasn't a parliamentarian then. Mr. Sobian was the AG. But since he did the Bail Act, because the Bail Act before that was a matter of common law and all kinds of things, some statute too, but he codified it in a Bail Act in 1994. We had 15 amendments since then. But when they refused in 2016, it took us right back to 19. All the benefit of the restrictions that we had for the 15 amendments disappeared. And today we do not have those. So what we do here today is to bring back something we already had. We had it when they proposed it to this House. We had it when we supported them in having it, to give the police that extra equipment to fight the criminals so that the citizens don't have to see the revolving door that I told you about and lose confidence in the law and lose confidence in the ability of the society to protect them. So the Constitution allows it, and that is what we are here to look after today. The Attorney General was very profuse and equally profound in his analysis of the clauses, and I think that should suffice. I don't think my colleagues in this House need any further persuasion. Suffice it to say that the UNC, my colleagues, not the UNC, my colleagues on the other side, they circulated a list of amendments. I had a read of them. It was, I suspect, politically motivated. I suspect that they will support these measures here today. But they don't want to just say, yes, we agree, because they may lose face after they took the strident positions. We're not supporting that, we're not supporting that. Maybe that's their understanding, and I understand that. I'm a compassionate man. So they want to come with some frivolous amendments so that they could tell their supporters, well, yeah, we pushed some amendments, and because we put amendments, that is why we support it. I understand that too, but compassion is my middle name. You know that. I'm a gentleman. But having looked at the amendments, some of them are, quite frankly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm hearing a raspy, croaky voice that I'm accustomed to hearing in the bars around Trinidad and Tobago. I hope that I'm protected from it.
Proceed.
Too much sugar cane. Energy. Madam, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the amendments proposed by my friends on the other side is that we amend Clause 5B2. Now, Clause 5B2 in the bill that we have before us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and 5 is where we do most of the amendments, but they want to propose another amendment. 5B2 says a court shall not, and I'm reading it, a court shall not grant bail to a person who, on or after the commencement of this act, is charged with an offense listed in Part 2 of the first schedule, and those are the serious offenses against the person. That includes murder, of course, but murder is already non-bailable. That was saved since 1925, and that is in Part 1. But we listed a number of offenses. I don't have to go through them in the interest of time. But it continues and has been previously convicted of an offense which is punishable by imprisonment for a term of 10 or more years. The UNC is proposing that we insert after the words previously convicted, we insert the words and insert the words within the last 20 years. Now, the effect of that is rather than leave it open for once the person was already convicted, a person who was already charged, the person who was already convicted, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we leave it open. So if he had the conviction 25 years ago, it stands against him today. The UNC is proposing that we put a 20-year limit. They are limiting it. But I want to point out to them, I will not support that amendment because we are not here dealing with the sentence. We are not dealing with, and they're also proposing that we insert the words and has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment for 5 years, where, of course, we have 10. I would not support that amendment. And the reason is because we don't have, it is not within our domain to issue sentences. That's not our business. As legislators, we are concerned with creating offenses. And we're dealing with serious offenses and restricting bail on account of those. So on the question of what is the sentence the court stipulates, that is not a matter that I will say concerns us, except to say that we would like to see more severe sentences as the law prescribed when dealing with firearms and other such matters. The UNC as well is, the UNC as well is proposing, because we are saying, as we amend Section 5 of the Act, we'll be putting in a new subsection 2, subsection 3, subsection 4, subsection 5, 6, 7, and we're putting in a new 7A and a subsection 8. So they are proposing in the list that was circulated, which has come to my attention, a number of things. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the things they propose is to remove subsection 3C. We will deal with that more fully in committee stage, except to say that any offense, because this subsection 3C talks about any offense listed in Part 2 of the first schedule, except an offense under Section 6 of the Firearms Act, where the prosecution informs the court that the person or any other person involved in the commission of the offense used or had in his possession a firearm. So you have an offense, and Mr. Deputy Speaker, the prosecution is telling the court that a firearm was involved. In those circumstances, we are proposing that bail is restricted. We are proposing that bail is restricted. In England, I might tell you quickly in passing, when I was a law student in England, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there were about 8 police killings, and that matter generated some public discussion in England. And it became clear from the outpourings of that interrogation, if I may call it so, that although the British Bobby typically at that time doesn't go around with firearms, because you would see police with a baton and a whistle in England and a radio, you will never see a gun. But today you will see more guns because they have had terrorist incidents and police cars that are specially marked, if you know them, carry weapons. But in those days, it wasn't so. That I'm talking about 1989, 1990, thereabout. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, in those 8 cases, what came out of the discussions from that is that once the police get a report that a robbery or some abduction or kidnapping is taking place, if they only hear that a firearm is in the atmosphere, they don't only send the regular police, they send a special operations team, akin to our SWOT. And they will take up positions, and they'll use all their tactical maneuvers, and they'll get a bullseye shot aimed at your head or something. Because you, with a firearm, pose a risk to other people in a serious way. I'm not saying that that's what we do in Trinidad or that's what we should do, but I'm only using that as an example to demonstrate how being armed with a firearm to cause intimidation and fear as you rob or you rape or you do what you do is a serious thing in England, as indeed it is a serious thing in Trinidad. And on that basis, I believe we should maintain the provision as we have it drafted. So if you are charged for an offense, a specified offense, and you find yourself facing another charge for one, and a firearm is involved, then your bail should be restricted. Suffice it to say, and I don't need to elucidate upon that anymore. We leave that for the committee stage when they elucidate upon it themselves. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Clause 7 of this bill speaks about this sunset clause, because our Clause 7 says, this act shall continue in force for a period of 3 years from the date of its commencement. We are putting in a sunset clause. In other words, all that we do today should expire in 3 years. And we must come back, we will come back to Parliament. Yes. So ask our friends again to give us support. Yes, I'm confident we're going to whip them in the east, north, west, south, central in the next election because they're not making sense. We're going to beat you. We're going to beat you. And we know that. But I'm saying this has a sunset clause. I don't want to hear the member for Couva North. You see, I told you I want to discuss the bill. Right. When we gave support back in 2011, when we, Mr. MP Dayal Singh, MP Faris Al-Rawi, myself, and others who were here, when we gave support, we gave them a 5-year sunset clause. That's right. 5 years. The last time we came with the anti-gang law, we were hearing 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, all kind of months. I'll comment it. But we are, I'm sorry. But as I told you, as I conclude, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the one thing that resonates in my spirit is that we are really afflicted by serious crimes in Trinidad and Tobago. And as one Christian reading his Bible told me, part of the reason for that is because we are failing to keep the biblical laws, which says that you must deal with it and there must be justice and sanction with promptitude. We are working on those matters. There's no doubt about that. We also know that this revolving door of which I spoke, it really reduces public confidence in the justice system. And since they know that we make laws, they look at us as being less than effective as we should be. And I call on my colleagues, the member for Caroni Central, can't talk, the member for Pointe-a-Pierre. I call on even my friend who distanced herself for the last 48 hours from the truth, the member for Couva North. I call on her to find it in her little, not so warm heart. Yeah. I ask her.
Please, 1 second. Again. Member, direct to the chair, and again, member for Couva North, please. You had the opportunity, not at this time. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As I conclude, I call on my friends really seriously. Don't think that you are doing this for us. This is not for us. This is for your constituents, the people that you quarrel about, even deceptively on a regular basis. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, member. Thank you, member. I recognize the member for Pointe-a-Pierre.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As I rise to give my contribution on the bail amendment bill this afternoon, I want to start off by saying, why are we here? And I mean that in full respect to all of us here, Deputy Speaker. We are here this afternoon because we were told or reconvened, Parliament was reconvened, and I want to say that I got a message from my good friend Oruka Maloney around 11 p.m. last Wednesday, I think, asking us she would be reconvening Parliament to discuss, to debate the bail bill. And in preparing since then to now, Deputy Speaker, I had to refer back when the bail bill was debated in the Senate and passed in the Senate on the 11th. It started on the 11th and it was concluded on the 12th of June. That is in my calculations, about 7 weeks ago. Today is July 31st. So I listened both to the Attorney General and the Minister of National Security, Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and even my friend, who is the chair on a GSC that I sit, Minister Hines, Laventille West. Now, I'm not reposing any confidence. I just say we sit together on a GSC. And when I listen to them, Deputy.
Member for Oropuch East, I would not like you disturbing the session, please. Proceed, Pointe-a-Pierre.
My colleague Oropuch East could disturb me anytime he wants, Deputy Speaker. But, Deputy Speaker, when I listen to Port of Spain North, especially St. Anne's West, in his debate this afternoon, it literally he's told the story that the reason we are here is really due to the Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith. That's what he said. Because this bail bill is what Commissioner Gary Griffith has told this government, that he needs this piece of tool, this legislative tool, in aiding him to fight crime and, by extension, to get illegal guns off the street. And that's a valid reason. No one is disputing that. And I will go so far to say, Deputy Speaker, that if anyone knows the history of the People's Partnership and the UNC in fighting and eradicating crime, is no other than Commissioner Gary Griffith, Deputy Speaker. Because he was part of our tenure between 2010 to 2015 in helping the PP's government in eradicating crime. He did such a good job that this government hired him as Commissioner of Police to help them fighting crime. He did such a tremendous job, and we want to compliment Commissioner Gary Griffith. I know him personally, just like my friend from San Fernando West. So, Deputy Speaker, I listened here this afternoon about Digger Martin East saying that the reason why we're here is because Commissioner Gary wants it. Now, I want to go back to that in preparing for this debate. Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. I want to go back when I was preparing for this debate, Deputy Speaker. Because when I go to the Hansard in the Senate, when the Honorable Minister of National Security was debating on the 11th of June, he started off his debate by reading into the Hansard a media release from the Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith, on the 11th of June. And it stated basically what he said today, that Commissioner Griffith is calling for this bill. He then today, this afternoon, read out another release, or mention another release, that Commissioner Gary Griffith and the Police Service had put out on June 24th. Another press release calling for this bail bill, June 24th. So 11th of June, Commissioner Gary Griffith is pleading with this government to get the bail bill passed. 24th of June, pleading with this government via press release to get this bail bill passed. And even yesterday, he is also pleading to the House to pass this bail bill here. Now, it is interesting, Deputy Speaker, that on the 12th of June, this piece of legislation was passed by the Senate. The opposition, it's on record, voted against it. And we'll just explain that later on. But when you review the debates on 11th and 12th, and you review the debates of the Attorney General piloting and the winding up and the committee stage of that bill, you would have seen the Attorney General imploring the independent senators with the opposition to support this bill because we need this tool. So I was of the opinion, Deputy Speaker, as Chief Whip, when I saw that back then on the 12th of June, I issued a statement to my colleagues. Start to prepare for this bail bill because it has to come. It has to come before the Parliament session goes off on vacation in the first week of July, since the 12th of June. Today is the 31st of July. If that piece of legislation was so important to this government, why did it not debate that piece of legislation before Parliament ended and went off on recess and we have to be corralled back in here? And if it was so urgent and wanted to assist Commissioner Gary Griffith, they should have helped him back on June the 13th, June the 14th, and bring the legislation to the House to debate. Correct. Why were they holding it in their back pocket, Deputy Speaker? Correct. Were they waiting for some crime issue to escalate in this country to bring that piece of legislation to hoodwink the population that the opposition does not want to support that legislation? So, Deputy Speaker, I also want to say for the Hansard record, and I see, and I'm glad the Minister of National Security is here. I, the Member of Parliament for Point-de-Pierre, I am not a firearm holder. I do not own a firearm, and I want to say that because I am not too sure when this bill is passed what would happen. So, Deputy Speaker, I'm fearful of guns. Okay, so I put that on the record. Deputy Speaker, I want to get in to my amendments that I presented here this afternoon, and the government has a copy of it, and my colleagues have a copy of it. Because you see, I listened to the member for Laventille West. It's damn if you do or do if you're damn. Because the Attorney General, and I don't think anything will expect anything different when we get to committee stage or even in his wind-up. Because I'm trying to give a very measured debate and sobering one, just like the Minister of National Security, which he gave a very sobering and measured debate. We brought amendments here this afternoon. We told the population we have amendments, and we are prepared to work with this government today to make a better piece of legislation for the good of the country, for the good of the country. I have said, and it's there in the media, that the door is never closed by this opposition. Yes. It's never closed. So it is not, I'm not playing the politics. I'm not playing the politics. But, Deputy Speaker, it's interesting that the Attorney General, when he was piloting the bill this afternoon, he referred to a comment from the Law Association. I have a copy of the Law Association comment on this bail bill, number 4 of 2019. And it's a document that has, from the Law Association, of 12 points. And I wouldn't refer to all 12, but I refer to maybe start off the one that the Attorney General mentioned in his debate. And it talked about, and I quote here, this is the Law Association. The association is unable to discern exactly what this means. The phrase in exceptional circumstances. It is not defined, so it will be left to the judiciary to flesh out the circumstances in which it may depart from the prohibition against granting bail. So that particular comment, when the Attorney General was moving the bill, piloting the bill, mentioned that in his debate. And he gave an answer, I presume, because I'm not too clear what the answer was, but he gave an answer to the Law Association. The same Law Association that they seem to be having problems with of late. Now, the same document, I want to, before I get into my amendments, and I want to refer to the comment of Laventil West when he looked at the opposition's amendments in clause 5B2. And one of the amendments that we have proposed here this afternoon, and the member for Laventil West had mentioned it, in clause 5B2, insert after the words previously convicted the words within the last 20 years, delete the words which is punishable by imprisonment for a term of 10, insert the words and has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 5 years. So that is one of our 8 amendments that we have proposed today for this bail bill. Now, it's interesting that the Law Association, in their comment number 8, and I quote, a person, which is kind of very similar to our amendment, a person in category 1 who is deprived of his liberty for at least 120 days and for a maximum of 1 year because he is charged with a listed offense and had been previously convicted of another offense carrying a 10-year sentence or more, is in effect punished with imprisonment once again for the offense for which he was already convicted and presumably served his time. But for the fact of his previous conviction, he would not have been denied bail. So his previous conviction, the law says you would not have been denied bail because of his charge for a listed offense. The provision therefore vests power in the police by laying a charge to deprive a man of his liberty and to punish him twice over for an offense for which he has already been punished. So, Deputy Speaker, the Law Association is saying to the Attorney General to consider a man who was already convicted, serve his sentence, and do not punish him twice for serving his sentence. That is technically what the Law Association is saying. We are saying in our amendment, Deputy Speaker, our proposal is that this amendment, which is clause 5B2, our amendment is proposed because the denial of bail is a matter of grave consequence for someone who is charged with a criminal offense and enjoys the constitutional guarantee of the presumption of innocence in our legal system. Therefore, there is a presumption that a person charged with a criminal offense is prima facie presumed to be entitled to bail. The provision of a proposed in the bill seeks to deny bail to a person who is charged with a scheduled offense but has a conviction of an offense that is punishable by a term of imprisonment of 10 years or more. So that is what this is in the substantive form by the Attorney General. The provision, as proposed in the bill, suffers from the flaw that the consideration of the first conviction is not limited to a period of time retrospectively. This has the potential to reap serious hardship on someone who has already been punished by law for the offense he has been convicted for and is now charged for his second offense. The same theory and thought that the Law Association put out, we have asked in an amendment. The provision does not take into consideration that there may be persons who have been rehabilitated, right? So they have changed their way, and this provision is one that will allow a person's past to haunt their future conduct. So we are saying to the Attorney General, consider the individual past. He had a charge, he was convicted, and he may have been rehabilitated, just like the Law Association, Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, and we are saying to the Attorney General, if he has difficulty, because we propose a 10-year limit, a 20-year limit, sorry, if he has difficulty with a fixed period of time, because this could open the door, we are saying, to a person serving a long sentence, having some kind of benefit from the proposed provision, we are prepared and we are asking him to meet us halfway and say that in considering the period of time since the last conviction, any period of time that the applicant has spent in prison is not taken into account. So we are asking, we are saying let us be flexible here this evening, Deputy Speaker. Now, in the same clause 5(2)(b), we are asking to consider changing some wording and adding something. The second part of the amendment in clause 5(2)(b) is a very serious amendment that demonstrates how much, I would say, I wouldn't use the word how much little thought, but in considering the denial of bail for the first conviction, the consideration of the conviction is premised on a sentence by the sentence that could be imposed for a breach of law. And we are saying, in the original form that the Attorney General has here, he has punishable by imprisonment for a term of 10 years or more. We are saying to the Attorney General, consider, and it might be more powerful because you are now capturing a greater group of individuals by looking at a term in prison and the sentences of 5 years, Deputy Speaker. So we have put together something here for the Attorney General to consider. When we look at the second amendment, which is clause 5(3) of the bill, we are saying delete that clause. The member for Laventille West went through it, and he said he wouldn't consider it. But why we are saying delete clause 5(3)? Because we feel that clause 5(3) is already captured in the first two parts of that clause, right? So you have 5(3)(a) and 5(b), but what we are saying, the mischief that could go on in that clause 5(3)(c) is where, the Commissioner of Police is doing all he can to stamp out the cancer that pervades the police service. And you know how he's doing that, Deputy Speaker? So they will say that we are again against the police service. We are not against the police service. We complement the police service. The Commissioner of Police right now, in trying to stamp out the cancer that is within the police service, he's asking the policemen to take a polygraph test. It is not we asking them to do that. He is asking his policemen to take a polygraph test because he feels that there are some issues with certain policemen in certain locations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I noticed today in the newspapers, the Commissioner of Police even took a drug test. And there was in the papers where he was the first one up to take a drug test, and the record showed that he passed. So it shows good leadership by the Commissioner, Gary Griffith. So if he did not feel that there was some cancer within the police service, why would he want to subject the men to a polygraph test? And I am sure if my friend from Laventille West would and should agree with me with that statement. He's not here, but we have had discussions before. So when I look at our third amendment, Deputy Speaker, our third amendment is really a sort of a fixing a mischief in that clause. And it is really clause 5(4) of the bill, Deputy Speaker. And we are saying delete the word mention in and replace by the words being subject of. And the Attorney General could look at it at committee stage, and we are saying there's a mischief in that clause with the wording, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, Amendment 5. Amendment 5 is clause 5(6) of this bill. And we are saying there needs to be a definition, as my colleague from MP for Naparima had mentioned in his debate. He referred to clause 5(6). there needs to be a definition for similar and materially similar, Deputy Speaker. So we need some clarity because it cannot be left up to the legislature, the judiciary, to determine similar and materially similar. That is what we are here today. We are here about passing legislation, making it substantive in nature, so that where we can tighten the loopholes, because, you know, I heard the Attorney General say, really. So we are saying, why are we here then? Are we here because we do not feel we cannot trust the judiciary? Because the powers of the judiciary right now can grant bail. The magistrate can grant bail, the judges can grant, they can deny bail also, Deputy Speaker. Why are we taking away? Why are we taking away that right from them? Are we saying to the judiciary that we do not trust them? So all I ask the Attorney General is to consider our Amendment 5. Deputy Speaker, our 6th amendment, our 5th amendment is really Clause 7A, and that is where it's really the proportionality clause. And it sorts, and the Attorney General mentioned that in his debate, and he felt good about Clause 7A. But Clause 7A, in the proportionality of the aspect, is only restricted to subsections 3 and 7 of the bill. And we are saying, because we are here, I wouldn't use the word tampering, but we are now trying to bring a piece of legislation for the goodness or the good of the country. And it requires a 3/5 vote, and it requires our votes. So you are saying that, yes, we know we are tampering with the constitutionality. And you're trying to find a balance, and that is what the Attorney General has said, is a balance. And he found that bringing in 7A, there's a proportionality in the bill. But we are saying, do not only restrict it to 3 and 7, bring it for all the clauses from subsections 1 to 7, and it will really give a true proportionality of the bill. Be seen that we are using our 3/5 here to change and to bring a piece of legislation that requires a constitutionality change, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I get down to Clause 6, Amendment 6, sorry, Clause 7, which is the sunset clause. Now, when you go back to the bill in the Senate, the original form that the Attorney General brought in the Senate was for 5 years. Was a sunset clause for 5 years. He's given the impression that this government in the Senate, on their own goodness and volition, changed it to 3 years. In the debate, Deputy Speaker, it was Senator Thompson, when we were at committee stage, had advocated a 2-year sunset clause. And the Attorney General, at that point in time, really, to be honest with him, didn't see any problem with a 2-year sunset clause. And he mentioned, well, let us look at 3 because of the statistical data issues that you would not be able to get proper statistics. So he felt a 3-year sunset clause or cooling off period would have been better. So they agreed on a 3-year sunset clause. From 5 years, with the independent and the government, they came up with 3 years. So it's not that the government, in its first incarnation of the bill in the Senate, it was for 5 years. The first incarnation of the bill in the Senate, everybody was going to get no bail, one way or the other, in its first incarnation of the bill in the Senate. It was because of the presentation by Senator Choate, Senator Heath, Senator Vera, where they talked about the rights of innocent people could be affected because it wasn't based on a second offense, it was based on the first offense, that everyone would have been denied bail. And Senator Choate and Senator Heath had serious problems with that. and the government gave in for the better of the country. So I applaud the Attorney General, because innocent people could have been caught up, and that's what the opposition was saying. So when we look at this sunset clause, we are asking, so I want to deal with our amendment 7 and a new clause 8. And so in clause 7 in our amendment, we are asking for a sunset clause of 1 year, and our new clause 8, we are asking to add, and I want to read it in. The minister responsible for national security shall, within 6 months from the commencement of this act, and at 6 months intervals thereafter, lay in Parliament a report detailing, Deputy Speaker, detailing the number of applications for bail made by persons subject to this act, and the number of applications granted, the offences for which such persons have been charged, and the number of applications refused. I think that is very fair, that a request from this opposition to ask this government, ask the Minister of National Security to come back. If we give you the support here tonight, come back to Parliament on a 6-month basis, lay a report so that the opposition could review it, Parliament could review it, the government members could review it to see how effective this bill has been. And that is a very reasonable request. You don't think so, colleagues? Yeah. And I don't see anything with that. Because if you're asking that this bill is the be-all and end-all, or one of the tools, along with the anti-gang legislation, in eradicating illegal guns off the street, and we are prepared to meet you, tell the population in Parliament after 6 months what has been happening with the bill. Now, the Attorney General in his mind might say, well, you can ask those same questions in the GSC and the Ministry of National Security, and you could bring the Commissioner of Police in front of you. That is all well said, Deputy Speaker. But we all know in a GSC, in the Ministry of National Security, is led, the chairman is a government representative, and the government outnumbers the independent and the opposition, and it is really up to the government to decide who they bring forward in front of them, Deputy Speaker. Then you can say, well, you can file a question, and that might be so. But we all understand that if the government doesn't want to answer the question, they can delay it until it reaches a point in the stand where they have to answer it. So we are saying, in the fairness and accountability that this government talks about, come back in Parliament after 6 months and report how this bill is doing. And I think that is fair. And what it also does, Deputy Speaker, I'll tell you what it also does. It is like a performance appraisal on the Commissioner of Police. It is like a performance appraisal. So that if the Commissioner of Police is asking us to give him this tool, legislative tool, in eradicating crime, and we are saying we might be prepared to do that, then the Commissioner of Police not only works for the government, he works for all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are saying, come back to Parliament and account, because this government is saying, you request this legislation. So we tie in this new clause 8, and with clause 7, with the sunset clause, is basically the same thing, the rationale behind it, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we have my last amendment. It's a new clause 9. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I want to believe the Attorney General might be thinking along our lines, where, and I read into the answer this new clause, where any application, we are asking for a new clause, it's a catch-all clause, where any application for bail is made under the provision of this act, the burden of proof shall be on the applicant to satisfy the court on a balance of probability why bail should not be refused. You understand? I see you, Deputy Speaker. It's a groundbreaking piece of clause here, because the burden of proof is on the applicant. So if the Attorney General is saying they need, and I listen to the Attorney General, I listen to member for Laventille West. I even listened to the Minister of National Security, Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. They say draconian measures.
Yeah, Honorable Member, your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15 minutes. Care to avail? Proceed.
Thank you, sir. So they talk about in times that we are in, sometimes draconian measures are required. And we are saying, look at this new clause. So we want to show the population that we are willing to institute a clause that really can deal and put the burden of the proof on the applicant. So if you want bail, come and tell the judiciary why you should not get bail or why you should get bail. So the burden of proof is on the individual. That's a groundbreaking piece of clause, right? Deputy Speaker? Now they might say, we don't know what we're talking about, but we know what we are talking about, Deputy Speaker. So Deputy Speaker, those are the 8 amendments that we have put forward to this government. We have asked them to look at it very respectfully. We have asked them to take it on board, reach us somewhere, because this is not only a one-way street. It takes 2 hands to clap, Deputy Speaker. And it's not only about this government bringing legislation, blaming the opposition if we don't take it carte blanche for what they put forward, right? It is something that so what they are saying, only the PNM government could pass legislation. Is that what they're telling this country, Deputy Speaker? I don't think so. I don't think so. So, Deputy Speaker, I have went through our amendments that we have proposed, and I know other speakers on my side would enlighten a bit. But before I end, Deputy Speaker, I want to go back to something that the Minister of National Security had mentioned in his debate. And I was just asked questions to the Minister of National Security. He mentioned about the radar system. And the radar system is, based on the Minister of National Security, is technically a tool in helping us protect our borders. So I listened to him and I went back to his Hansard. I went back to his Hansard, Deputy Speaker, right here in this house on June 28, 2019. And the minister was talking on the Immigration Amendment Regulation 2019. So page 135 of the Hansard on June 28, 2019, Minister Young. I will have the population, and I quote in, just a short paragraph, I will have the population know this. Our radar system is working. They're stumping on their side. Our radar system is being upgraded. So they're improving, the Minister of National is saying we are improving the radar system, but the radar system is working. And I went to the radar system, this is the Minister of National Security, and I'm quoting, after the registration process, which is after the Venezuelan migrant process, because we have been monitoring all before, and what I had said even before, after the consultation with Minister Dillon, I said, you know what? Let us use the intelligence and the data we get from the radar system. Because you see, Madam Speaker, boats take certain pathways even in the sea. So we looked at it over months. I just quoted exactly what is in the Hansard. This was starting over a year ago. And we began analyzing the data to see where marine vessels, marine resources, and the Coast Guard. So, Deputy Speaker, the whole issue about this bail bill that the Minister of National Security had talked about, and he's right, taken illegal guns off the street, prevented from coming into our country. And he's correct. And I was kind of taken aback because I really didn't know where our radar system, what was the status of our radar system. So the Minister of National Security right here, just a month ago, had said the radar system for over a year has been operational. And he has been reviewing the radar system, and he can see, I've never seen the radar, but I'm assuming I fairly understand what a radar system does. He can see where the boats are coming in. And I'm asking a question to the Minister of National Security. If you know the boats are coming, and you keep saying that the illegal guns are coming via vessels, why didn't you do something about it? There are vessels that are, I wouldn't say parked up, but at Stobers Bay. We, the PP government, purchased Daemon vessels for the Coast Guard. They talk about the Chinese vessels that we purchased, right? But you know, what's the funny thing about that? Commissioner Gary Griffith, who was our minister, played a great hand in the procurement of those Chinese vessels. And he went vessels, and the Daemon too. And when I talked to him, those vessels that are there, because he's a genuine fellow, those vessels can do the patrols that are required to protect our borders. The OPVs are not the be-all and end-all of patrolling borders. And this government tries to paint a picture, without the OPVs, the borders are unsecured, it's open. But you have a radar system is working, you see the vessels coming in, you have vessels in Stobers Bay, and one of the issues I am told is a manning problem. It's really a staffing problem by the Coast Guard. They do not have enough manpower to do the critical shifts that are required to keep the vessels that they have out at sea. And we are saying to this government, give the resources to the Defense Force, financial resources, give the manpower to the police service, give the financial clout that is required to the Commissioner of Police to do his job properly. Correct. We are saying that. So it is not about legislation alone, Deputy Speaker. It is a holistic approach in fighting crime, because legislation alone cannot eradicate the guns off the street, because you need to give the police service vehicles. So you have a lot of vehicles that are parked there because lack of payment for maintaining the vehicles, Deputy Speaker. So you go around everywhere. I mean, I don't want to make it sound trivial, but just a couple of days ago, I read in the papers that the police station could not even supply ink for photocopying, something as basic as that, Deputy Speaker. So if something as basic as copy ink, the police stations cannot get, what is this government is really trying to tell the Commissioner of Police? That this piece of legislation that we pass here today, you take that piece of legislation, don't come back to me, and get all these guns off the street. Is that what they're telling the Commissioner of Police? It can't be. No, it can't be. So, Deputy Speaker, I know my time has ended. I didn't think I would have taken so long.
You did well.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank this country. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I recognize Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is not my intention to take the 45 minutes allotted to me, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you for recognizing me and for this opportunity to make a short contribution on this bail amendment debate. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the first product that any government has to provide to its people is safety and security. That is the first product. And this government has been in office since September 2015 to date. So it's almost 4 years. And we are at this stage. And in my contribution, I would say that we have reached a crisis in this society at this stage. It is a crisis that really deals with the very existence of the state of Trinidad and Tobago.
Correct.
So there is an existential crisis for this state called Trinidad and Tobago because of crime, narcotics, and gangs. And that therefore, the very existence of this state is threatened because of the dominance of crime on the social agenda. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the matter now is that when you look in terms of political theory, you look at Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the social contract theory. Man is free, but everywhere he's in chains. There is despair, there is hopelessness, and there is a kind of apathy that has set in and a resignation because of what is happening. And that is why we were called out, I think, to deal with this piece of legislation. And I want to congratulate my colleagues, the Honorable Member for Naparima, the Honorable Member for Couva North, and for their contribution in this debate. But I also want to, Mr. Deputy Speaker, congratulate the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he indicated that he is not here to cast blame or aspersions. Incumbent on all of us this afternoon to give the police that fighting chance. And so on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that crime is not a political football, and he is not prepared to make it that. And they all reiterated the express requests of the Commissioner of Police for this piece of legislation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to commend the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West on his contribution. Yeah. Like the member for Pointe-à-Pierre who spoke about the amendments, and in the political arena, it is necessary for collaboration and compromise in the interest of the country. I always believe in that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I want to, because you see, in my reading, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the book Skin in the Game by Taleb, there is an expression called motive attribution asymmetry. And it deals with the fact that on your side, everything is love, and you love everybody on your side. And on the other side, you hate everything and you hate everybody. Now the fact of the matter is that in that kind of situation, there is no room for compromise, that there is a kind of ideological barrier because of the blindness of that position, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And that is why I was a bit surprised at my very experienced colleague, the member for Laventille West, in his approach in the first part of his contribution. I thought that if you want to bring about compromise and you want to bring about collaboration, you must nurture and you must lay the bed for that kind of collaboration. And that therefore, in your early period, and I understand clearly the gallery you were playing to. Yeah, I understand the gallery you were playing to, but I think that notwithstanding your experience, you must take the newly found maturity of the member for Port of Spain St. Anne's, North St. Anne's West in his contribution we find today.
Are you suggesting that I should have cuddled in the proverbial bed with the member for Couva North? In the proverbial, yes.
You see, what I'm saying that you are even incapable of understanding what I'm talking about. And cuddling with a vibrant, vital woman like the member for Couva North will not do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, will not do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, so that, and the Honourable Member for Port of Spain, but before I proceed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to suggest to the Honourable Member for Laventille West that he reads an article reads an article by a Trinidadian who lives away, a very well-written and experienced author, Niala Maraj. And the article is entitled, The Soul of the Congaree. You should read it for your benefit. And it deals, and in his contribution, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he dealt from a perspective in which he saw things. But the reality is that the way people see things on your statements was quite different from the manner in which you saw it. So let's take a broader view of these matters. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we have in this country today is that when you recounted the statistics of the Honorable Attorney General provided us with, together with the statistics of the Honorable Member for Port of Spain, North, St. Anne's West, what we have is a hail of bullets. It's a hail of bullets, a pile-up of bodies by the thousands. And we have effectively in this society a harvest of lead. Not the kind of lead that the member for Oropuch East spoke about. That was speculative lead. This is a real harvest of lead that is taking place in this society, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And that therefore, what do we do? What do we do as legislators? What do we do to our oath if we remain committed to our oath? What do we do? How is our duty to our country? Our duty to our country? It means that we have to look at the legislation, and we must take into consideration the legislation and the amendments put forward by the member for Pointe-à-Pierre, and that therefore our duty as legislators is to do what is best for the country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, so how do we deal with the tangible despair that is outside there? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I came in last night, and I spoke to several of my colleagues over the last few days, and including this morning. And there is fear, which is tangible. There's hopelessness. There is no institution that is giving them that kind of hope that this country will move forward. And it appears that there is the despair that they feel is that we are like treading water and not moving forward. And that we are in a regime of despair and hopelessness. And the only beacon is Gary Griffith leading the police service of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, when you look at I looked at a video, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I saw the Commissioner of Police in the midst of a crowd in which he is, in fact, there dealing with it. And this video is taken from a vantage point. So he has skin in the game. He is putting his life and that of his fellow colleagues on the line every day. What do we do here now as parliamentarians? So there's coming back to my original point, there's an existential threat to this society as we know it. And that the need for intervention by this parliament is necessary. We are not saying that the bail bill is the silver bullet. I think that was echoed by the member for Port of Spain North. He indicated that there's no magic wand. So this is not no Low Ranger and Tonto and the silver bullet will cure all ills. What we are saying is that from the perspective of as a parliamentarian, that this is part of the tool in the armory against criminal activity. This is not the be-all and the end-all. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so the despair because of institutional failure, the judiciary is glacial in its approach. Now with climate change, Glaciers may be melting faster than the judiciary moves in this country. There is a whole imbroglio, a whole commerce emerging out of the judiciary. So that therefore the criminal activity, and the criminals know this, you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they know, they are aware of this. They are aware of this. So that therefore you cannot, the institutional failure in that area. So in every area of life in this country, we have to reboot, rethink our approach if we want to carry this country forward. We can't even provide water for the people, whilst the whole world moving forward into artificial intelligence and robotics. And we in this parliament, we have an obligation to create the compromise, to create the collaboration in order to move this country forward. And Madam Speaker, it is my intention that to bring about the change required, we must first begin to change the way we approach the atmosphere between both sides of this parliamentary sitting and house. The whole agenda here must be one in which you move away the asymmetry and we bring about symmetry and a level of commonality. So with these few words, Madam Speaker, I thank you.
General.
Madam Speaker, and I thank my learned colleagues for the compromise in managing. Madam Speaker, may I be permitted to say that I've said this publicly for years. There are few people in this Parliament in its history that could equal Shogunas West's eloquence and temperament, and I have learned a whole lot from him as a parliamentarian, certainly in my days in the Senate and also sitting in this House. So I thank my learned colleague for encouraging us to move to the symmetry as opposed to asymmetry of a debate. Madam Speaker, I can in like mind also equally compliment the member for Pointe-a-Pierre on perhaps, I think, the most poignant debate today in terms of a clinical analysis of what recommendations are on the part of the opposition and certainly what the government can consider. Madam Speaker, it would be disingenuous if I would have complimented my two colleagues opposite and then take the bait to respond to Naparima. So I will just simply say in respect of Naparima's contributions, so that we can dive to the punch quickly, that I reject all of his submissions. I don't wish to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but suffice it to say that for the record, I reject the submissions of the honourable member, and I will focus instead upon a few of the matters that have come about in terms of a precision point. Madam Speaker, the honourable member for Shogunas West said quite correctly, echoing Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and echoing Laventille West, he said quite properly, he put it in a question, he asked, why are we here? And obviously we are here pursuant to Section 53 of the Constitution to pass laws for the peace, order, and good government of our country. Madam Speaker, we do that in the context of the Minister of National Security, and I wish to compliment him for this, putting on record the statistical information which is required to consider the constitutionality of the law which we're debating right now. That statistical information feeds into a court's view of Section 13(2) of the Constitution. Section 13(2) of the Constitution says that if you intend to abrogate or abridge or interfere with a Section 4 or 5 right, that you must have a 3/5 majority, and that it must be reasonably within the parameters of proportionality. It must be such that a democracy of Trinidad and Tobago's type, in its fact context, ought to foster. And Madam Speaker, permit me, therefore, to speak to a few of the issues. There's one statistic I think that is yet to be put onto the record, and permit me to do that now, in feeding the need for this law. The Trinidad and Tobago Prisons Administrative Offices wrote to me on July 29, 2019. At my request, I had asked for further statistical information, and I'm able to say now that there are two tables provided. One, the number of convicted males. Secondly, the reoffender rate. And this fits into part of the amendment suggested by Pointe-a-Pierre in looking for a chain towards a 20-year limitation and for convictions to be counted at that point. The prison service has confirmed across the following categories: firearm, gang activity, sexual offenses against children, sexual offenses, offenses against the person, dangerous drugs, anti-terrorism, trafficking in persons, kidnapping, those being offenses which are in the schedule that we introduced by Clause 6 of this bill, that we have, Madam Speaker, in the period 2009 to 2019, the following reoffender percentages. Let me put it on the record. For 2009, the reoffender percentage was 68%. Going through straight up to 2019, the percentages are as follows: 69%, 68%, 69%, 68%, 67%, 69%, 67%, 75%, 70%, and 78% as at 2019. That is an important statistic because in this law, in Clause 5 of the bill, we are proposing to introduce a one-strike provision, and that one-strike provision is with respect to coming before the court, having had a conviction for a scheduled offense, and coming with a charge for a scheduled offense. Now, the submission coming from Pointe-a-Pierre in the amendments that were circulated that he spoke to, the honourable member has suggested that we ought to say, firstly, put a time frame, say that the convictions are chained to a length of time, in this instance, 20 years, and the honourable member suggests us that that is necessary to treat with proportionality. The answer to that, Madam Speaker, as to why that suggestion ought not to be accepted, is that we have over the years, certainly from 1994 straight through till 2015, we have toyed with and implemented 3-strike, 2-strike, 1-strike, taking it through 15 years and 15 years with a different method of calculation, then to 10 years with a different method of calculation. But I have just read out the reoffender rates between the period 2009 to 2019. And what is consistent in that statistical information pot is that the reoffender rate at 78% or at 70% is fairly consistent for a 10-year period. And therefore, what is really required to change the needle point, to move the needle in the right direction, is to eliminate the reference to a period of time. Because we've had it since 1994. 1994 was 25 years ago. 2005, when we started these amendments with a different calculation of the 15-year period, the needle did not move. I just read the figures, 68 to 70% consistently. Therefore, statistically and scientifically, it is open to us now to adjust that metric because we have the data now to demonstrate that there is a problem to be treated with differently. If we apply the same methodology, we're going to get the same result. We have the statistical information that demonstrates that the reoffender rate makes that argument fall, that argument for a chain to the number of years of conviction. Secondly, we ought to resist that application of amendment because, Madam Speaker, the legitimate aim in this bill is to cause panic in the mind of the criminal. The member for Naparima suggested that this bill was going to cause more people to be incarcerated, that that situation needed to be dealt with. But this bill treats with people in possession of unlawful firearms, unlawfully in possession of firearms. This bill does not treat with people who are not in unlawful possession, meaning people who lawfully have under Section 6 of the Firearms Act. Under Section 6 of the Firearms Act, when you look to the manner in which the law is applied, if you have a lawful excuse for being in possession of a firearm, in other words then, if you don't have a license, but you have a lawful reason for having it, you are not deemed to be in law in unlawful possession. So if we were to accept Naparima's argument that somehow you are putting people who should not be in jail in a pot, then, Madam Speaker, most respectfully, that argument falls flat on its face, because we do want in our legitimate aim to target people with unlawful possession. Why? Again, we turn to the statistical information. And what does the statistical information tell us? The statistical information tells us in the 10-year period between 2009 to 2019, we have had 17,908 reports of firearm-related offenses, with the figure going up every year. Arrests for possession of firearms in that same 10-year period, 2009 to 2019, 5,900 people have been arrested, with the figure going up every year. Look, in 2009, there were 360 people arrested for an unlawful firearm. In 2019, and we're only halfway into the year, 649, double the figure, more arrests. And therefore, there is a legitimacy in the aim of this law, and a legitimacy in saying, if you have a conviction for a scheduled offense, then you really ought not to find yourself in possession of a firearm unlawfully. And, Madam Speaker, Chaguanas West and Pointe-a-Pierre asked a sensible question. They asked the question, Pointe-a-Pierre put it quite plainly, whether this law is to treat with a lack of trust in the judiciary. The law at present is the 1994 law as it cascaded back, with certain amendments which were preserved in 2008 and 2005, none of which treat with the number of strikes or the type of offenses in the schedule. The law as it currently stands is that you have to have 3 strikes. The law as it currently stands is that you stand a greater chance of getting out. The law as it currently stands is not the number of amendments we had 2004, 2005, 2006, 3 in 2007, 1 in 2008, then again in 2011, then again in 2014, then again in 2015. That's not the law. Members may be mistaking what they remember the law to be, because many of the honorable members here piloted or participated in that law. Chaguanas West was in government for the 2011, 2014, and 2015 amendments. I am not criticizing him if there is some confusion in remembering the law that way, but that's not the law. The law is the 1994 law. And the mere fact that the law needs to be amended is evidenced by the fact that the law was in fact amended so many times. So, Madam Speaker, my learned colleague for Pointe-a-Pierre, in his first amendment, suggested that clause 5 of the bill, that we should delete the words previously, after the words previously convicted. The honorable member says that we should look at modifying the word convicted. The honorable member puts out in his amendments, insert after the words previously convicted the words within the last 20 years. I've just dealt with that. The honorable member says delete the words which is punishable by imprisonment for a term of 10 years. Let me explain that one. We have put in the reference to punishable by 10 years, Madam Speaker, not by whim or fancy, but by reference to the following laws. Act number 18 of 1994, Act number 32 of 2005, Act number 10 of 2007, Act number 15 of 2007, Act number 25 of 2007, Act number 9 of 2011, Act number 1 of 2014, Act number 7 of 2015. All of those laws, all had reference to the 10-year prescription. Why? Because that is how, from a parliamentary perspective, in the separation of powers construct, you give the judiciary the parameters under Section 53, where only this Parliament has the power to make law for the peace, order, and good governance. A court cannot do that. A court can construe the law. A court can strike down law as offending the Constitution, but a court does not make law in a statutory form. It may evolve the common law. And therefore, in these 8 pieces of law, and in particular, Act number 7 of 2015, where the UNC brought the amendments, in Act number 1 of 2014, in Act number 9 of 2011, where the UNC government brought the law, they all had the 10-year period to indicate the type of offenses. Because you want to make sure that you're doing it in the legitimacy of the aim in reference to serious offenses. And that is why we cannot accept a retrograde step in the law. I don't mean that pejoratively, but it will take us past even what was the common law prior to 1994. That, respectfully, does not make sense. And for the benefit of honorable members, the offenses captured under the Bail Amendment Act, Madam Speaker, are Section 61A, 61B, Section 61C, Section 61D, Section 64, 65, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 1, 14, 2, 14, 3, and 15 of the Anti-Gang Act. What are those? Gang leader, 25 years, gang member, 10 years, etc. I'm putting it on the record as to how serious these matters are. Under the Firearms Act, Section 61, Section 62, 64, 65, 91, 92, 10, 11, 10, 12, 13, 15.3a, 15.3b, 31.2a, 32b, 32c, 33, 34. Sexual Offences Act, all sexual offences under Chapter 1128, all sexual offences under the Children's Act, under the Sexual Offences Act. We then list them out. What are they? Rape, grievous sexual assault, incest, sexual assault with a mentally subnormal person, buggery, indecent assault, serious indecency. I think you catch my drift. These are the most bloody of crimes, the most vicious and heinous of crimes. And if we don't legislatively indicate the odium that we have for these offenses, then we will unwittingly capture people who we don't want to catch. Let me give you an example. Under the Sexual Offences Act, people who fail to mandatorily report a rape, a nurse, a teacher, a pastor, that person will be caught here. We don't want to catch the mandatory reporting doctor who may have been afraid for life. We don't want to catch necessarily the person who was associated with living off of the income of a prostitute in the circumstance where that person is a victim. We want to catch the people referred to as the benefactors or persons who benefit, the pimps. We want to catch them. The only way we can do that is by specifying the 10-year limitation. So respectfully to the honourable member for Pointe-a-Pierre, that amendment proposed just does not make sense in the context of the proportionality of the law, because the first limb of proportionality is that the law must have a legitimate aim. If we take away the legitimacy of the 10-year prescription, then the aim falls flat on its face as a matter of law. Madam Speaker, my learned colleague, the member for Pointe-a-Pierre, then suggested in his second amendment that we delete Clause 3C. Madam Speaker, Clause 3C is to be found, the honourable member suggested that we delete subclause 3C in Clause 5.3. At 5.3, Madam Speaker, C as listed at page 3 of the bill, the honourable member suggests that we delete this, and let me put onto the record where this 3C came from in Clause 5. This is where you can find yourself subjected to the provisions if you're charged and charged, double charge, you have an existing charge, you're out on bail, you come back with a charge listed in Part 2 of the first schedule, except an offence under Section 6 of the Firearms Act, where the prosecution informs the court that the person or any other person involved in the commission of the offense used or had in his possession a firearm or imitation firearm during the commission of offense. Madam Speaker, if we delete that, how do we explain that that was introduced into law for the first time by Act number 7 of 2015? The UNC introduced that provision into law by Act number 7 of 2015. But further, forget the fact that they introduced it. Was it constitutional? That is where the cases that I referred to earlier come in. The Court of Appeal in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in CV 2015-03229, Ryan Reno Mahabir versus the Attorney General. In CV 2015-0345, Daniel Saint-Omer versus the Attorney General. In CV 2016-00074, Justin Stuart Charles versus the Attorney General. In the latter two cases, the Court of Appeal upheld the constitutionality of that same clause. The lawyers who were seeking to strike out that clause, one is a fellow named Anand Ramlogan, and the next one is a fellow named Gerald Ramdeen. So the UNC passed the law. The two UNC lawyers, one in the Senate, one as Attorney General, tried to strike down the law, and the Court of Appeal upheld the law. And today we're being invited by Pointe-a-Pierre to strike out that section. Madam Speaker, look, let me be very fair to my learned friend, the member for Pointe-a-Pierre. I know he's not an attorney at law, and the only senior counsel on that bench is absent today. As the member for Siparia, neither has leave to be absent and is just simply not here, as far as I'm aware. So, Madam Speaker, I don't make any criticism of my learned friend for that proposal because senior counsel for Siparia is not here. Madam Speaker, I don't know if that was a note from senior counsel, but anyway, I think I've addressed it. Madam Speaker, my learned friend then asks for an amendment to clause 5.4, delete the word mentioned in and replace with the words being the subject of. Madam Speaker, I don't know if that's a Doppia amendment, God forbid. In 5.4, Madam Speaker, quite simply put, 5.4 at page 3, which is clause 5 of the bill, subject to subsection 5, where a person is charged with an offense mentioned in subsections 2 or 3. A person can't be, respectfully, where a person is charged with an offense being the subject of subsections 2 or 3, a person, in a drafting sense, can't be the subject of subsection 2 or 3. They have to be the subject of the thing which is in subsection 2 or 3, and that thing is the charge. So, Madam Speaker, I just don't know where that amendment comes from. It makes absolutely no sense linguistically or in law, and therefore I respectfully disagree with that proposal. Madam Speaker, the next amendment is that we amend clause 5.6. And the honourable member says there needs to be a definition for simile and materially similar. And Madam Speaker, just to put on the record, clause 5.6, Madam Speaker, comes directly out of Act number 7 of 2014. It's to be found at page 4 of that law, subsection 11. And if there was no need to define it in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, when the law applied, as it was brought into life by the UNC, for heaven's sake, I can't understand why it needs to be defined now. But let me not rest my laurels there. Let me go further. Can it be improved? Has a court looked at it? The courts have looked at this section and have found no difficulty in the application of the law. So why interfere with something now, A, that had no need for definition for the full time that it was in existence, and B, that the courts have sought to leave undisturbed, because the role of the court is to interpret the law, Madam Speaker, and to apply it. It allows a living flexibility. It's like a heart having the capacity to move by contraction and expansion to pump lifeblood. So too does the law have the ability as a living entity to breathe and move, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my learned friend then says, and this one is the most serious of the amendments, the honourable member proposes that clause 7A be omitted. deleted. And clause 7A, Madam Speaker, for the record, the government has brought clause 7A to match up with the Canadian case law. The Canadian case law appearing in Her Majesty the Queen versus Maximo Morales, in the Attorney General of Quebec versus Edwin Pearson, Supreme Court 1992, in the decision as well coming out of RV Antic SSC 2017. See, Madam Speaker, we don't arrive here without having done the law and the research. These Canadian laws, these Canadian cases on the Canadian laws, find very good reference for us because the Canadian Bill of Rights, their charter, is the most similar to Trinidad and Tobago. It's not exact. We have a very unique law. We have a law that no other CARICOM island has. All of the other islands have the ability to have an exception to constitutional support if it's in the need of national interest. We are the only ones hamstrung by a 3/5 majority or 2/3 or 3/4 majority. We, Trinidad and Tobago. And so, Madam Speaker, not only do we meet Canadian muster, but we meet the muster prescribed in the amendments that caused the UK Parliament, as I read the dicta of Lord Falconer in piloting the amendments to the Criminal Justice and Protection Act. I read that into the record, and that comes directly out of the reference to the European Court of Human Rights in Caballero versus the UK government, appeal number 32819 of 1996. It was decided in 1999, and it springs from the State of Mauritius versus Coriati, 2006 UK Privy Council matter. And yes, Madam Speaker, that reversal of burden in 7A is a unique architectural feature which matches up with the old Section 5.2 in the 1994 Act. It matches up with the Canadian jurisprudence. It matches up with Section 25 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994 as amended. So, Madam Speaker, to delete clause 7A is to create a gross unconstitutionality. But let me go further, because the honourable member may quite correctly point me to the introduction of 7B. And in 7B, Madam Speaker, in 7A, the honourable member is suggesting delete the references to 3 and 7, right? And 3 and 7 are the exceptions to the position. But the honourable member says that what we should do is to make reference to all of Section 5, 5.1 to 7. But Madam Speaker, may I urge my learned friend, not being an attorney at law, and I mean no disrespect by that, there are many noble professions. The Prime Minister has a particular view of lawyers, which I can't repeat right now, but he's married to one, his daughter is one, his son-in-law is one, etc., many members of the family. All that I will say, if we make the mistake of I should say, legislatively interfering with Section 5.1, we will be in deep trouble. Why? Because, Madam Speaker, the Court of Appeal in Daniel St. Omer versus the Attorney General and Justin Stuart Charles versus the Attorney General, the Court of Appeal said, do not touch Section 5.1. Section 5.1 is the thing that is allowing you constitutionality. That matter is, those two matters have been given leave to appeal to the Privy Council. Caution dictates, as Attorney General, that I invite the Honourable Parliament to studiously avoid interfering with Section 5.1. And therefore, the amendment proposed by my learned friend for point of pair would make a mockery of that caution. Let the Privy Council decide upon the four corners constitutionality of that law, even though it's an academic exercise. Why? The UNC allowed the law to collapse. So it is an academic exercise, but that academic exercise becomes real because Section 5.1 still exists. Secondly, it will be the first case in the Commonwealth, and certainly in Trinidad and Tobago, to test the four corners of what Section 13.2 means. Let me explain that for a moment. Section 13.2 of the Constitution is of a higher standard. Section 13.2 is rooted to issues like your national security. Section 13.2 is not to be treated with in the same fashion as Section 4 and Section 5, because it's a different test that has yet to be tested. So we have to leave that alone, and we therefore cannot accept my learned friend's suggestions. My learned friend asks us to remove the 3-year sunset clause to 1 year. I must respectfully, on behalf of the government, decline that. Why? Madam Speaker, we need to have space to operationalize the law. And let me prove it this way. In 2007, Madam Speaker, we had the following acts. In 2007, we had a series of acts. We first of all had I should go to 2006. We had number 30 of 2006, number 10 of 2007, number 15 of 2007, and number 25 of 2007. You notice there were 3 acts in 2007. Why? UNC then knew that a special majority is required. All of these acts are bail amendments. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. What did that prove? What did that actual exercise bring to the table? Nothing. Nothing happened by coming back to Parliament 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Nothing. Realistically, will we get the Privy Council's decision in St. Omer and Stuart Charles in 1 year? No, Madam Speaker, we won't. Why not allow for common sense to prevail? Keep the 3-year period. Let us get through that position, have the benefit of the Privy Council's decision, have the benefit of the statistical information.
Attorney General, the original 30 minutes are now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to complete.
Should it please you?
You may continue.
Yes, Madam Speaker, from a commonsensical point of view. Fact number 1, the 3 amendments, the 3 laws in 2007 made not a hoot of difference. We tried that. Fact number 2, the Privy Council's decision in the 2 cases for which there is leave to appeal will not be heard inside of 1 year. Fact number 3, let's be real. We're in a run-up to end of government's term, parliamentary-wise. Parliamentary time is scarce. The last thing we want to do is to have the fight against criminality interrupted by a sunset which comes in 1 year. It just does not make sense. If there is, to borrow Shogunas West's quotation, skin in the game, and a return to symmetry as opposed to asymmetry, then the symmetrical approach, the logical approach to this is that we go for the 3 years. Yes, the government went with a 5-year period. Why? We wanted to test the appetite. Was 5 years unreasonable? No. The UNC government asked for a 5-year sunset clause in the bail amendments that accompanied the anti-gang and which accompanied anti-kidnapping. So if it was good enough in 2011 for 5 years, what's the difference, honorable members, in the symmetrical, skin-in-the-game approach to now say 3 years? Madam Speaker, it's why I find my learned colleague from Shogunas West a persuasive speaker. The ideas can cross the divide, quite respectfully, Madam Speaker. I wish it could cross the back bench and the front bench of the UNC, but it certainly can cross this divide. Madam Speaker, the honourable member asks for, point of pair, a new clause 8, effectively that the minister comes every 6 months with a report. My response to that, quite respectfully, number 1, yes, you do have a Joint Select Committee on National Security. Yes, it is currently chaired by the member for Laventille West. However, there is another Joint Select Committee. It is chaired by Senator Sophia Choate. That committee is the subject of equal call for this material. It is why we have the ability to have committees go to work. The Westminster system of Parliament is built upon the strength of its backroom committees, its front-room committees, not only the benches of Parliament. Secondly, it is a fact that reports come to Parliament late. We've all seen the idiocy of reports coming, some dated 2002, 2008, being laid in 2015 or in 2019. Reports are habitually late. What are you going to do? Go to court and get a mandamus to compel you to produce the report? What is that going to achieve? It's by far more prudent to utilize the Joint Select Committee approach to access and test and call for evidence on those matters. And therefore, this recent idea of bringing reports every 6 months to talk about bail and how many applications, etc., you could ask CAPA. You can ask the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for that statistical information. Anybody could ask them, and they'll give it to you. Joint Select Committee number 1, Joint Select Committee number 2, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, which can anonymize the applications, is option number 3. But you also have Freedom of Information Act of the TTPS. You also have questions in Parliament. So you have 5 bites of the cherry, which are by far more efficient than laying a report on the table of this Parliament. So really, it doesn't advance the constitutionality or depth of the bill to consider an amendment of that type. The last one. Where any application for bail is made under the provisions of this Act, the burden of proof shall be on the applicant to satisfy the court on a balance of probabilities why bail should not be refused. Madam Speaker, whilst this is a commendable approach, it is limited. Number 1, there are points in time where the burden will shift in certain circumstances. They will return and then not return, depending upon who has the obligation to discharge. Secondly, the amendment which we have caused to Section 7A, which is in Clause 5 of the bill, takes care of that burden of proof issue on an implied basis. There's no need to be expressed because it is trike law that where a defendant in criminal proceedings has a burden to discharge, which is constitutionally recognized as well in Section 5 of the Constitution, that is on a balance of probabilities. It then returns to the prosecution on a proof beyond reasonable doubt basis. So there is no need to interfere with that law, most respectfully, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is one provision that I've not addressed in the Honourable Member's submissions. The Honourable Member suggests in the new 7B at Clause 5, where an application for bail is made under this subsection, no subsequent application shall be made unless there is a material change of circumstances. I just cannot advise, as a legal advisor to this government, that we accept that clause. That will be to introduce what the Americans call a bogey into the situation. It is unprecedented. It skirts on unconstitutionality of a type which I have no precedent for in terms of Canadian jurisprudence or English jurisprudence or European Court of Human Rights jurisprudence, and I cannot at this point advise the government to accept that amendment. It would be to court danger, Madam Speaker, particularly when the St. Omer and Charles decisions are outstanding from the Court of Appeal. Madam Speaker, I will now begin to just wrap up one very important point. We've heard a lot about operationalization. And I'd like to tell honourable members, listen to Pointe-a-Pierre at times. The member for Pointe-a-Pierre, almost in a Freudian sort of way, said in relation to a previous debate that they were not going to support something because they finally understood the pieces of the puzzle coming together from the Office of the Attorney General. I recall that vividly. I recall seeing Siparia hit him an elbow at that point. And what happened, Madam Speaker, is that the member was referring to what the government has done. The population has not yet seen it in its full context because there are a few moving pieces to unveil shortly. But I am confident this government, this Office of Attorney General, this Ministry of National Security, under this chairman, the Honourable Prime Minister, as chairman of the National Security Council, has birthed the following. Number 1, the introduction for the first time of criminal proceedings rules. Number 2, the introduction of 2 divisions of court, the Family and Children Division and the Criminal Division with road traffic aspects. Number 3, we have raised the judicial capacity legislatively from 36 High Court judges to 64, from 12 Court of Appeal to 15. We have gone further to introduce a suite of legislation and subsidiary rules to treat with how you manage the children's criminality. We will be birthing by September, October, the removal of 104,000 cases in the magistracy per year out of a total of 146,000, where we remove road traffic offenses and convert them to violations. We will be coming to court on commonsensical matters. Coming to Parliament on commonsensical matters such as the decriminalization of marijuana. Madam Speaker, the judiciary has completed their advertisement process for the implementation of an expansion of the judiciary. The cabinet approved and underwrote, and the judiciary already hired a 5-to-1 ratio. Let me repeat that. 5-to-1 ratio for judicial support for criminal judges. They now have, for the first time, judicial research assistants, judicial support officers. Madam Speaker, it goes better than that. The government has approved, and the building has been rented, the expansion of the Legal Aid and Advice Authority, and by the way, the board is in place, for the launch of the Public Defenders System. That building is already in the course of being rented, and the outfitting is on deck now. The job interviews were completed. People are to be brought in. The office of the DPP opened its Tobago office under us, took receipt of their Park Street offices under us, which are being outfitted now. But most importantly, Madam Speaker, because we passed the court pay legislation and the criminal division legislation, what did we acquire? We acquired the ability for the magistracy on September, as it starts, to be computerized for the first time ever. Court mail and court filing electronically will go live in September. The legal profession has already seen it. The software is built up. And Madam Speaker, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has agreed to accept the software into the DPP's office. That software shows you the status of every matter, the next steps to be done, and who is required to do it. There's a dashboard. That never happened before in the history of Trinidad. And Tobago, certainly, Honorable Prime Minister. But Madam Speaker, let's talk even more. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service have, for the first time in their history, a special prosecution unit with forensic auditors, forensic accountants, specialist lawyers from the United Kingdom and local lawyers. That came out of a manpower audit commission by the Prime Minister. That came under a commission of police brought to this house by the Honorable Prime Minister. And when I hear all the accolades from Point-a-Pay about Gary Griffith, why, pray tell, could the opposition not then be symmetrical and vote for Commissioner Griffith?
They didn't have skin in the game.
There was no skin in the game then, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, I have just pointed out to some nuclear changes that never existed before. The member for Point Fortin, now with the member for St. Anne's, for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, the management of the remand facilities is now being perfected by putting a court at the jail, Madam Speaker. That takes $80 million in transportation costs out the system. So, Madam Speaker, we will not only speak this in the Parliament, we will go public very shortly. I'm confident the Honourable Prime Minister will also speak to certain very important announcements to be had in this system at the appropriate time. But suffice it to say, we are on the right track for the first time in the history of this country. It took generations to get there. Let me not belittle the efforts of all members who have served in government. But, Madam Speaker, I'll end by saying, Point-a-Pay said of Commissioner Griffith that he's a straightforward man. And the Honourable Member was talking about, stop talking about the OPVs. But I could tell you, Commissioner Griffith is on record as saying that he begged his own government to keep one OPV. Begged them. And I can say now, as Attorney General, having taken over the portfolio, that our attorneys, Mrs. Charles Russell Speechley, our UK lawyers who conducted that matter, begged Attorney General Anand Ramlogan to not rescind the contracts. Begged him. Literally begged him. So, Madam Speaker, we've looked at the amendments suggested by the honourable members. I will end by saying they're different from what came in the Senate. But, Madam Speaker, the entire independent bench supported this law. And the members on that independent bench are what gave the special majority. Naparima said that they didn't need any special majority. The honorable member was referring to the period when the UNC was in government, but the honorable member perhaps doesn't know that we have a bicameral system. You might have a special majority in the House, but you never have a special majority in the Senate. And it didn't matter what you wanted to do. When I sat in Senate with Senator Dial Singh, Senator Young, Senator Hines, etc., when we supported Senator Camille Robinson Regis as our leader, when we supported those bills, it's only then that the laws passed. And on those occasions, sometimes we did it even when every independent senator said no, like the Children's Act. They all said no. It was the UNC government and the PNM opposition that said yes to the Children's Act number 12 of 2012. Madam Speaker, I look forward to committee stage and I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460 be now read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House to sit until the conclusion of the matters before it.
Honorable members, the question is that the House continue to sit until the conclusion of the matters before it. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Bail Amendment Bill 2019 be committed to the Committee of the Whole.
Honorable members, the question is that the Bail Amendment Bill 2019 be committed to the Committee of the Whole. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause. PG, the whip has agreed to take 1 to 4 as a block.
Please, you, Madam Speaker.
Clauses 1 to 4.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 4 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 5.
The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. Whip?
Hello, Chair. We have proposed in clause 5B2, in the clause insert of the words previously convicted, the words within the last 20 years. And the reason for this, Madam Chair, is basically that we have saying that, you know, somebody who has had a first conviction would have been rehabilitated, and you should at least consider the time served, and he or she would have rehabilitated themselves, and for somewhat unfortunate circumstances, they might have gotten caught up in the wrong end of the law. So, for example, a 20-year-old individual might have served a 10-year sentence, and he would have gotten out at age 30. And then at age 55, we are saying, consider him not as a first offender, as considered as a first offender, and taking into consideration his time served. That's the reason why we put forward this argument, Attorney General. And also in consideration, Madam Chair, sorry, what the Law Association has said about the consideration in that format that I just described.
Attorney General.
Madam Chair, I thank my learned friend for the explanations. I, in the course of my wrap-up, indicated the reasons why we're reluctant on this occasion to accept these amendments. A, for the fact that we have already experimented as a jurisdiction with the chain to a prescriptive period of years, in particular in the 3-strike through 2-strike through 1-strike recommendations for 15 years, etc. And then in the various amendments between 2005 to 2015, where that was tweaked further in the manner in which you counted the years. The statistical information presented and actually articulated in the course of this debate, both by the Minister of National Security and in the statistics I put, demonstrate that we have had no material advantage in reducing the number of crimes in respect of which we've scheduled those offences in any meaningful way by engaging in this. We believe that in the same way that one ought to be exposed to jeopardy for a driving offence where there's a second charge, for drunken driving in this law under the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, if you go back before the court without a prescriptive period, you're treated with harshly. How can we explain to a bleeding public that we are putting in a limitation for the scheduled offences? I might remind, the scheduled offences are the most grievous offences in respect of which the conviction would have related to something over 10 years, rape, assault, grievous sexual assault, trafficking in persons, narcotics, attempted murder. All of these things, Madam Speaker, make us safe statistically and logically and reasonably in the zone where we think it's time to adjust this law. Madam Speaker, I've already addressed in the course of the debate the reason why the reference to 10 years is done. That is specifically to preserve the arguments for constitutionality and proportionality. Without it, the law would be too wide. We need to indicate that it's not just indictable offences, but it's very serious indictable offences. And it also allows, in the event that those parent laws were amended, and let's say a charge was dropped down below 10 years, we need to feature how the law continues to speak, and that's the reason for that. So in all of the circumstances, Madam Speaker, I respectfully decline the invitation to amend as suggested by my friend.
Okay, we'll have you dealt with all your amendments on the file.
Not really,
But
Madam Chair.
if I'll kindly ask you to deal with all,
Okay.
so that the Attorney General can answer all, and then I can put the
The
question.
second part of that amendment is the same clause, is saying, insert the words, and has been sentenced to a term of prison of 5 years. The original in the clause is a term of 10 years or more. What we're saying, AG, is that you're casting the net wider when you bring it down to the 5 year as opposed to the 10 year and more. And that was the rationale for us trying to give it some beef, some strength of casting the web a little wider.
Madam Chair, the jurisprudence tells us that when you go too wide, you become unconstitutional. So the argument in relation to separation of powers and the Section 13(2) is that this must be reasonably justified in a society such as ours. The courts don't look too lightly on liberty. Remember, this bill is not intended to punish, Madam Speaker. It is intended to balance the bail issue. Bail is not intended to incarcerate people. It's intended to be denied in just circumstances. The Constitution recognizes that. The UK Parliament, in its debates by Lord Falconer, equally recognized that. What this is to try and adjust the statistics that we are seeing here. So if we were to drop it from 10 to 5 years, we'd be falling into the trap of an argument of unconstitutionality because it's too wide, particularly where we have not referenced, as we do now, a reference to a 15-year or a 20-year limitation. So keeping it at 10, having the schedule very tight. Remember, Madam Chair, we removed things like larceny, receiving stolen goods. All of those things were in the old schedule, the existing law. We've taken those out and kept it to the most bloody of crimes.
Okay. You've dealt with all of clause 5?
Correct.
Okay, so the...
Well, go through 5.3, 5.4.
Just 1 minute, please. All of it is clause 5,
Do you want to go
and
through?
therefore, I've invited you to deal with the whole of clause 5
Okay,
because
sorry.
I believe the AG would have dealt with them in his wind-up. So that if you can deal with all, so the AG can repeat what he said in his wind-up, and then we could press on, rather than dealing piecemeally and breaking it. I don't think
Madam Chair.
that is really a really very efficient use of our time.
So the other amendment, the second amendment is delete in clause 5.3, delete clause 3C. And the rationale there, Madam Chair, through to the Attorney General, when you look at clause 3C, the mischief in there for us is the say-so aspect of that clause, where literally you're saying, based on not evidence, a say-so, where the prosecution informed the court that the person or any other person involved in the commission of offense used. So it's based on not on evidence, it's just based on an assumption or say-so, as we say. We have a concern with that in clause 5.4, Madam Chair. We recommend delete the word mentioned in and replace by the words being subjected of. We feel that needs, in his wind-up, the AG gave his explanation why he would not support the clause. We feel there's some ambiguity in that particular clause 5.4. In clause 5.6, in the amendments, number 4, we again ask the AG for the definition for similar and materially similar. He gave his reasoning for not supporting this amendment in his wind-up. We feel that there's a definition that is required. In Amendment 5, in Clause 7A, we feel that even though delete the word not standing with subsection 3 and 7, and we are proposing to include 1 to 7, Madam Chair, for the proportionality of making the entire bill proportional in our view.
I may have caused you some confusion. I ask you only to deal with your amendments to clause 5. So I think you've gone on to 7A,
No.
which
Oh,
is
sorry.
item
Yeah.
number 5 on your
Sorry,
list.
sorry.
Okay? So, AG, I'll just call you to address the items 1 to 4 on the whip's list.
Yes, please. Having already addressed item 1, Madam Chair, I'll go to items 2, 3, and 4. Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, in recommendation number 2, which is the deletion in clause 5.3 of 3C, Madam Speaker, the honourable member explained it as a mischief in the opposition's mind that it was based upon the say-so. Madam Speaker, if I could refer the honourable member to specifically Act number 7 of 2015, Act number 7 of 2015, which was assented to on the 29th of April 2015, a law brought by the United National Congress. At page 3 of that bill, B, Roman 2, the exact provisions are, in essence, applied there. But the difference between this law in 2015 and the law which we have now is that the 2015 law was an automatic ouster of the court. In 2015, you had no access to the court. The court was debarred from having consideration of bail. What saved it was maintaining Section 5.1 of the original act. So the Court of Appeal in the St. Omer matter, in the Charles matter, said, because you did not amend Section 5.1 of the parent law, the 1994 law, that saved what looked like unconstitutionality of this type of say-so clause. I'm just using the honourable member's words, right? Second factor, Clause 7A of this bill, which you've not yet come to, specifically applies to this subsection 3. And that is where we allow access to the court. Even though you shall not have bail, you can still have bail considered in exceptional circumstances. So the dance between 5.1 of the Parent Act and 7A, Clause 5.7A, that is going to treat us with positions of salvation. Madam Chair, the honourable member asked us to consider inserting a definition for similar and materially similar. I referred to the fact, Madam Speaker, that in the previous laws, as they existed on the books of Trinidad and Tobago, we had this already a feature of the law. That definition is to be found in the laws, again passed in the UNC's tenure. That is something which speaks for itself, as I referred to in my debate. In any event, Madam Speaker, we fall upon the Interpretation Act. And the Interpretation Act assists us clearly with that. For the record, in Act number 7 of 2014 at page 4 in subclause 11, you can find the same wording, similar or marginally similar offenses. There was no need to interpret it then. The courts have in fact considered bail amendment laws and have not sought to disturb themselves on this issue. And then the last issue is, of course, that the constitutionality is preserved because we preserved the 5-7. I think, Madam Speaker, that the sheet as circulated by the honourable member has an error.
AG, I just want to say that I was just about to tell member for point of appeal, while I apologize,
Yes.
his sheet is misleading.
Yes, ma'am. So that clause 5, that is his amendment number 5, which says 7A, it's really 5-7A. So if the honourable member considered it through you, Madam Speaker, appropriate to address his submissions on item 5, it would fall within clause 5. And I can respond with your leave.
Rep.
Madam Chair, just again, you know, in clause 5-7A, we really feel that for the proportionality should include all the subsections in the bill from 1 to 7, not only 3 and 7, because we feel there's a risk for it being struck down by the Constitutional Court.
Well, Madam Chair, it would be the exact opposite. Because the Court of Appeal has specifically in the St. Omer decision, the Stewart decision, Stuart Charles, said the constitutionality to be had in this entire series of bail amendments, albeit it collapsed in 2016 when the sunset applied. The court specifically pointed out that clause 5.1 was what preserved constitutionality. If we were to interfere with clause 5.1 now, by adding it in the fashion suggested now, we'd be disturbing, number one, a matter which is yet to be completed in the Privy Council, and number two, we'd be disturbing the ruling of the Court of Appeal, which is our highest court right now, on the issue. For that reason, I think it prudent to avoid amending clause 5.1 right now and to not apply the law. So therefore, the law as stated in the proposed amendments here is where we will reside.
Okay, so I now put the question. The question is that clause 5 be amended as circulated in the list of amendments by the member for point of appeal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 5 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 5 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 6.
The question is that clause 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 6 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 6 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 7.
The question is that clause 7 stand part of the bill. Whip.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, our amendment to clause 7 is the sunset clause. Again, we are saying delete the word 3 and insert the word 1 to the sunset clause. And the arguments have been put forward in the debate.
Attorney General.
Madam Chair, I agree that there should be a sunset clause, hence the reason it was proposed. It adds to the constitutionality whilst we're awaiting the Privy Council decisions. It is merely from a practical point of view that I disagree with my learned friend, mainly because the one-year period will not allow us to get to the Privy Council's final decision in the two cases that are on for leave to appeal. And secondly, it would be impractical in an election year to risk the Parliament not being able to use this law. We ought to allow for that to be completed, get the benefit of some statistical information. We think that a 3-year sunset clause is not an unreasonable one. It would allow any incoming government the ability to catch its stride and to look at the statistics, and therefore we respectfully maintain our position on the 3-year period.
Okay. The question is that Clause 7 be amended as circulated in the list of amendments presented by the member for point appeal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. The question is that clause. The question is that clause 7 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 7 now stands part of the bill.
New clause 8, report on applications for bail.
Just a minute. The question is that new clause 8 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. The question. Okay, so therefore I now would ask members that the bill now be reported. Oh, there's a new clause 9? Oh, so, okay, sorry.
New clause 9, burden of proof in the application for bail.
The question is that the new clause 9 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be now reported to the House. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. The House will resume. Call this committee meeting for us to do the preamble. The question is that the preamble be approved. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be now reported to the House. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. The House will resume. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I wish to report that the Bail Amendment Bill 2019 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved without amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with the committee's report.
Honorable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Bail Amendment Bill 2019. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460, be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460, be forthwith read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This bill requires a 3/5 special majority.
Mr. Alwari,
Aye.
Dr. Rowley,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mrs. Robinson Ritchie,
Aye.
Mr. Dialse,
Aye.
Mr. Hines,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Kudrow,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mrs. Kudrow Kuban,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Dillon,
Aye.
Mrs. Webster Roy,
Aye.
Dr. Gatsby Dolly,
Aye.
Ms. MacDonald,
Yes.
Dr. Francis,
Yes.
Mrs. Jennings-Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Oliver,
Aye.
Mr. Antoine,
Yes.
Mr. Leon,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Coffey,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Charles,
Yes.
Dr. Rambachan,
Yes.
Mr. Karen,
Yes.
Dr. Tuwari,
Aye.
Mrs. Nawala Hussain,
Yes.
Mrs. Gardine Gopi Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Indar Singh,
Yes.
Ms. Ramdial,
Yes.
Mr. Singh,
Yes.
Honorable members, with a division of 32 members voting for, 0 members voting against, and 0 abstentions, the motion for the third reading of the Bail Amendment Bill 2019 is approved.
a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. To a date to be fixed, and I wish everyone a happy emancipation tomorrow. Thank you very much. You're most welcome.
Do I ask if that is your Emancipation Day greeting?
We're prepared to do anything else but the bill today, and if you will allow us, we'll be very happy to bring emancipation.
As we all know, honorable members, Emancipation Day will be celebrated tomorrow. Before I put the question on the adjournment of the House, I now invite members to express their greetings on this occasion. Member for St. Anne's East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and to bring Emancipation Day greetings to this honorable House. Madam Speaker, we have come far in this country. We, the descendants of slaves, can think back to our ancestors and can think back to how they must have thought and wished and hoped that one day their progeny would be able to escape the life that they were bound to. It is inconceivable to us standing here now, being in control of ourselves, being able to govern ourselves, being able to forge our own path, that any of our children will be subject to that which the slaves were subject to so many years ago. And as we enjoy this liberty, as we think about it, and we celebrate this Emancipation Day, and we do the things that our foreparents were forbidden to do, and we behave in the ways that they were forbidden to behave, and as some of us worship in the way that they were forbidden to worship, we do this with the understanding that we stand on their shoulders. We do this with the understanding that we owe them a debt of respect. And in everything we do, our very actions, our thoughts, our words must be underscored by the fact that many of them died for the liberty which we now enjoy. And therefore, it is with great awe and great sense of responsibility that we enjoy and think about and reflect on this emancipation they experience and what it means to be free, what it means to have the responsibility of ensuring that not just our physical bodies are free, but our minds are free, free to love, free to tolerate, free to embrace, and free to do the things that would make our ancestors proud of the people we have become today. So as I bring greetings to this house and bring greetings to the African community, I bring these greetings understanding that even my foreparents would be proud of the person that I have become. And I do this understanding that I have a responsibility to create in this world, in my children, people of whom I would be very proud of in the years to come. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is a day of recognition. We show respect for and honor and celebrate the sacrifices and lives of those who faced untold hardships and immense deprivations, and who nevertheless fought for justice and the right to be free men and women, and who bequeathed us this same right centuries later. Today, if we are brutally frank, we Afro-Trinidadians are not well represented in the upper echelons of our society, the top 100 performers. We are comparatively underrepresented in business and in the professions. Today, we own few supermarkets, hardware stores, or small or medium businesses. But Emancipation Day in Trinidad and Tobago has now evolved to include not only the celebration of the end of slavery, but also the significant contributions made by the African community to the world, the Western Hemisphere, and to our country. Africa has greatly influenced the language, the food, the folklore, the music, the sports, and culture, and has left a legacy that has indelibly shaped our unique Trinbagonian culture, our pilau, sauce, poon, seasonings, chili billy, callaloo, cow heel soup, bacon shark, bear unmistakable reminders of our African heritage. But, Madam Speaker, when the colonials left in 1962, we were the schoolmasters, the nurses, the teachers, the public servants, the welders, the plumbers, the masons, the fitters, and the tradesmen in TPD, UBOT, Texaco, Shell, and BP. And what has happened since? And we could analyze that. My thesis is the decline of our group accelerated after independence, and perhaps studies will relate that to the reasons. The time has come for us, all of Trinidad and Tobago, to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago prospers for all of us. The time has come for us Afro-Trinis to remember the struggles of our ancestors. We must not see ourselves solely as victims of the system and consumers of the latest brand. Our young must resolve to forget the bling and persevere in schools. Our females must appreciate that in our present circumstances, we have to depend on them to help us recreate our reality, to develop a new, more focused, more responsible generation. Above all, we must never surrender. Our ancestors struggled too hard for us to give up on their dreams. I look forward to a time when we can hold our collective heads high and live out the dreams of those who preceded us. The time has come for change. We need to take control again, take control of ourselves, and be better citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, I also extend greetings to all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular those of African ethnicity, on the eve of the celebration of Emancipation Day 2019. During the transatlantic slave trade lasting from the 16th to the 19th century, it is estimated that over 20 million Africans were captured and/or entrapped and forcibly herded to the Americas and the Caribbean to work as slaves on the lucrative sugar plantations of the white slave master. History books vividly record the horrific conditions which millions of Africans endured through that Middle Passage journey. With the material comforts to which we have become accustomed, we may find it unimaginable that any of us, God forbid, if put to that test in present day, would survive. Although many millions never made it, many more survived to become the property of plantation owners, suffering even greater indignity and cruelty. The mighty sparrow and his calypso slave recorded in song the plight and plea of the African slave. I'm a slave from a land so far, I was caught and was brought here from Africa. And then they make me work. Oh yes, I work. Good Lord, no pay. I toil, so hard each day. I'm dying. Yeah, I'm crying. Oh Lord, I want to be free. Rights which we accept as basic human rights and fundamental rights which we are guaranteed as citizens under the Constitution of our beloved Twin Island Republic were unknown to our African slave ancestors. They were legally classified as property and required permission to marry, to hold public gatherings, and to practice their religions. The penalties for attempting to exercise any of those rights included physical torture and death. They worked from sunrise to sunset, 7 days per week, under inhumane conditions. But although they have been suppressed and repressed, there are many a story of their resistance, their resilience, their perseverance, their hope that they would overcome, if not in their generation, but in their children's or their children's children. On Emancipation Day, we celebrate the dismantling of the slave trade and slavery. But let us not lose sight of the significance of our role in modern-day Trinidad and Tobago to carry out the legacy of emancipation. That is to build an inclusive, just, equitable, productive, disciplined, and tolerant society. I therefore take this opportunity on behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and on behalf of my family to wish you members and all of Trinidad and Tobago an introspective Emancipation Day. Honorable members, the question is that this House now adjourned to a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Aye. All against say no. The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.